And we're going to be joining right this way on this historic ship. Alrighty, friends. Do I see some more folks joining us for the AMBROSE tour? Okay, whether or not that's a yes in just a moment. Are you folks here for this tour? So you can simply just follow me if you folks have already checked in at our gallery space. If not, I'll just add 3 to our numbers today. So for those just joining, my name is Jay. I work here at the South Street Seaport Museum, where we have 2 historic ships telling our journey of New York City as a city through our historic ships. Now, this ship here is nicknamed the AMBROSE. We'll learn of its real name as we head on board in just a little bit. But I do see we have some younger folks here, which is a good sign, because I need some brave navigators who can help figure out where we are at different parts of the ship. So if anybody would... Alright, everyone. So remember, last person on, please re-rope this. Hold on to the handrails for your comfort. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for re-roping, folks. We appreciate it. We're going to be heading to the front of the ship in just a moment. I'll meet you there. We're just going to latch this behind us. Thank you. Welcome aboard. Whoa. Good try. Could fit through our waters here, but his idea was not for the floating lift. He built the blueprint for this area here. So I just got a question. Was it Mr. John Wolfe Ambrose who decided on building floating lighthouses? He had the blueprint for this particular one, and it was very advanced for its time. This lightship was built in the year 1907 and was built by the United States Lighthouse Enterprise. This was a company that was trying to solve the fact that we didn't have enough space on our waters for lighthouses, so they built ships, which you can build in 3 to 6 months, that would be able to use their lights at the very top of their ships to help guide in other vessels into our waters in the New York harbor. So this ship was built in 1907 and it operated until the year 1962. But first, folks, I've got some brave sailors over here. Can you help find where we currently are and hold that up for us?
I want to say we're here.
So we're currently at the front of this ship, and we have this device here called the capstan. This is what's going to tell us the real name of this vessel. The real name of this ship is the United States Light Vessel number 87. Doesn't quite roll off the tongue, folks. We apologize. But that's why we call it the AMBROSE as a nickname. Dedicated to this lovely, lovely gentleman over here, who I'm going to flip to properly this time. So feel free to hold that up for everybody. Very good. You'll also see our famous orange tabby cat. His name was Gus, a good friend on board this ship, who would also help keep off rodents. So, folks, let me get that for you right now. You folks stay.
Хорошо.
Waiver tree, that's next door. But for those just joining us here, we were talking a little bit about this floating lighthouse and what this floating lighthouse does. So, folks, what is a floating lighthouse and what are its responsibilities? It's a ship that sits in the water and uses its light beams to help guide other ships into our waters. Now, every floating lighthouse has 3 responsibilities that it needs to complete. First, it needs to make sure that it's staying put in the water. Can anyone look around and see any objects that might help us stay put in the water? I'll need your eyes, everybody. Feel free to point it out if you see something that'll help us stay put in the water. So I'm seeing some points over here. These are called the bits. That is absolutely correct. This here, these bits are connected with very, very thick rope that connect us on to other bits right on the pier over here that you'll see right behind us. That helps us stay put in this water at the pier. Well, what are we noticing behind us over here, folks? What do we think this bad boy is? That is indeed an anchor. This is called the mushroom anchor, named because of its shape. It looks a little bit like a toadstool mushroom over here. And this is 5,000 pounds, folks. This is the backup anchor. There's one at the very, very front of this ship. If you were standing on Pier 16 down below, you'd be able to see the front or primary anchor. This is the backup anchor. We have backups of everything on this ship to make sure. These are called redundancies, which is just a fancy word for backups. How do we lower this bad boy down into the water, you might be wondering? Can we just lift 5,000 pounds with our hands? We've got this device in front of us. This is called the capstan. This ship was a steam-powered ship. Therefore, if we turn on our steam-powered engine, we can connect this mushroom anchor to this device here. This capstan, there's a manual version on our sister ship, the Wavertree, right across the street. That manual capstan, you would add in wooden bars and you'd be able to push around a heavy load, like you might see in a pirate film. But since we have steam power, we can simply attach this, turn on the steam engine, and whoosh, that engine goes right down into the water, or whoosh, it comes back up using our steam power. So, how do we stay put, folks? We can use our bits and we can use our anchors. Now, what are the other 2 things a floating lighthouse needs to do? Not a warehouse. We need to stay put in the water. We also need to be seen by other ships. How would we be seen by other ships, folks?
Lights.
This is a floating lighthouse, after all. Where's our light coming out of? Our light masts upstairs. Very good, everyone. Now, this ship was built in 1907, ended its career in 1962. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But originally, in 1907, this ship operated on kerosene oil, so it was like a big, big lantern. 1 year later, though, it was replaced with a generator that used its steam power to generate its own electricity. So it had electricity and running water as of 1908. So this was very advanced for its time. Lastly, so we need to stay put, we need to be seen, and lastly, we need to
be heard.
Be heard. Very good. If anything happens with our lights, we need to also signal to nearby ships where we are using sound. Now, do I have any brave volunteers who want to give this bad boy a ring? Anyone?
You want to go?
I see some young folks who can help us over here, so if you'd like to join us. So what we're going to do, folks, you can gather around Millicent, all 3 of you. You can gather right behind over here, each of you. So each of you stand behind it. So you can stand behind it, there you go. Put one hand on each of it. So you can put one hand over here, Millicent. One hand over here if you can. So all together, you can get nice and close. Very good. I'm going to put my hand on top. We're going to swing this back and forth, folks. Do we have any sensitive ears? Give yourselves a clap of applause, folks. Would you like to give it a try? All right. Very good. We're doing one last try. All right, one last ring for good measure. Very good. Now I'm going to put that pin back in. So, folks, if we were really swinging this, if I were pulling full force into swinging this bad boy, this bell could be heard up to 5 miles where we would be stationed in the water. Where would this ship be stationed in the water, you might be wondering? That's an area called the AMBROSE Channel, named after our good friend who unfortunately did not make the process to see how important this ship would be. Now, the AMBROSE Channel is what we call an ocean highway, an area that was dug an extra 30 feet. Not on board this ship, unfortunately, and we are here for 45 minutes. Unfortunately, we do recommend, there is a bathroom right across the street, around the corner in that gray building past our friend the Wavertree. That is a note to everyone, we do not have any bathrooms properly on board this ship. If you need to head off.
Also in that building.
Yes, inside of Pier 16 on the 4th floor, you can take the escalators up if you need that as well. So folks, again, as a quick review, the 3 things that this ship needed to do: stay put, be seen, and be heard. We're going to be heading directly inside of the pilot house where the steering wheel is in just a moment's time. So you folks.
Это я сфотаю. Давай, я подержу. Следующий боюсь. Подожди, Мелисса, подожди. Спустись.
And folks, if you are heading off, please just make sure you relatch. Those coming in, feel free to enjoy our wheel while we spin in the meantime. Melissa, feel free to give that a spin. You folks are more than welcome to try the wheel. It's not going to drive us anywhere if you cut one spin in just a moment's time. Feel free to fill on in, everybody. We got enough space.
Sorry.
Very good, Melissa. Nice turn. All right, folks, feel free to fill in. We've got plenty of space here. I see a couple more who need to come on in. We'll get nice and cozy. Is everyone okay? How are we feeling? Do any bathrooms need to be used? I want to make sure that we're comfortable, folks.
Yes.
So, everyone, you can pile on in. We've got a little bit more space to see a couple of people that still need to join us. Thank you, everybody. Make sure we have enough space for our friends. All right, you can come aboard, everybody. We've got enough space. We are currently inside of an area called the pilot house, or the wheel house, which is where the wheel is. Now, after those 3 rules I just mentioned, we needed to stay put in the water, we needed to be seen by other ships, and we also needed to be heard. But that first rule, folks, staying put, that means we're not moving a whole lot. So you wouldn't be here in the pilot house unless we got moved from where we're supposed to be. And where was this ship supposed to be, folks? This ship is currently here on Pier 16, but when it was serving in 1907, it would be at the entrance of the Atlantic Ocean, using its light beams to say, hey folks, follow our lights into New York City. There is a quick little map that we have over here. I'm going to try to make sense of how this operates. We are currently right here at the tip of Manhattan, at the very, very top of this nautical chart. And this ship would be all the way out in the Atlantic Ocean over here, sitting at this area right there. And it would be, there's this open area called the Ambrose Channel. That's the area that Mr. Ambrose helped have dug out an extra 32 feet for bigger and bigger ships to make it through. We're sitting on the entrance of that Ambrose Channel, and we're saying, follow our lights. Come into Manhattan this way, right? So we're sitting out over here, we're saying follow this all the way to us to enter New York City. So we would only be here in this wheelhouse, in this pilot house, if we got moved off station, because folks, I won't lie to you, this crew had a crew of 14 people, and either it was incredibly boring or it was too exciting, in fact. Let me show you a quick picture over here, folks. This is called the Olympic. This is our size comparison to a ship known as an ocean liner, a big boat just like the Titanic. As a matter of fact, the Olympic is the sister of the Titanic, made by the very same White Star Line. And unfortunately, I won't lie to you folks, unfortunately, the Olympic has a little bit of a kill streak, folks. This ship, the Olympic, is known for running down a number of floating lighthouses, which is very sad and unfortunate. The crew of people on board did not have enough time and space. What we're seeing right here is us. This is the Ambrose. The Ambrose was not run down, but there are 3 instances where the Olympic was coming into the New York harbor and it did not have enough space to slow down using its 4 big engines, and it unfortunately crashed through other floating lighthouses. So it could be very dangerous on board these ships, folks. Now, either you were completely bored because you were sitting in the water and you were waiting for ships to arrive to you, so you'd have a lot of free time, or it was all hands on deck because you want to make sure you don't get run down by a big ship like the Olympic. Now, what are we seeing around us inside of our pilot house here? First, you might notice a particular color. What kind of color are we looking at here,
Green.
folks? A very, very bright mint green. Why is it this very specific mint green? That helps reduce glare. Sunlight that's beaming in over here, that green is going to help absorb any sunlight that might be beaming through our portholes. Mr. John Wolfe Ambrose was very smart. Floating lighthouses during this time in 1907, they usually only had 2 portholes to see out of. That's not going to be enough when we have ships that are coming as fast as the Olympic is, right? We need 6 portholes here that give us 180 degrees of viewing. That allows us to react a little bit faster. Now, I mentioned that this ship had a steam-powered engine on board, right? Now, folks, can you feel free to point to where we currently are right over here? You can hold that up nice for everybody. We're currently inside of the wheelhouse. And since this ship had a steam-powered engine, very, very good, there would be 4 gentlemen inside of the engine room downstairs constantly shoveling coal into that steam-powered engine. And they would be doing that 24/7. Why is that, folks? Because the engine takes 2 hours to turn on. Do you think we have 2 hours to turn on if the Olympic is barreling at us at full speed? No. No, folks. So we have to constantly keep that running. But how do we communicate to the folks downstairs in the engine room if we're up here in the pilot house? Can anyone look around and see something that we might use to help us? Do we think this is a communication device? Inside it looks a little bit more like a compass. We'll get to this in just a moment. Figure B over here, folks. If I were trying to communicate with the crew down in the engine room, I might use these here speaking tubes and this particular accent to let people know that I am trying to communicate with them downstairs. These speaking tubes allow us to have words go downstairs into the engine room and heard by the crew that were shoveling coal. And if we wanted to hear what they were saying to us, we would have a receiver right over here. So we have an easy way to communicate back and forth. Now, let me point to these bad boys over here at figure D, folks. These are shorthand hammers that connect to a bell downstairs. When we ring this, pardon me, careful, careful, you don't want to hurt your finger when I ring this up. When I ring that down, that's going to make one bell gong downstairs, and this one is going to make the opposite side of that bell gong. This bell says, turn the engine on. This one says, turn the engine off. And depending on the sound that you would hear downstairs, you'd know how to react. We're going to be going downstairs into the crew's quarters in just a moment, but you folks already figured out what this is. What was this again?
It's like a navigation tool.
That is the compass indeed, and it is encased in something called a binnacle. Where does that word come from? That's a bi, meaning 2, plus knackle, meaning weights. There are 2 heavy weights that help cut out electromagnetic interference, which is how we figure out where we are. So this will always point north. We're going to be heading downstairs into the crew's quarters in just a moment, folks. I'm going to lead the charge, so pardon me. And as we head down these stairs, there's one set of stairs that's going to take us down into the crew's quarters. We recommend going in reverse because there's a secret hidden step that some people might trip on. We want to make sure you don't twist your ankles here. So follow me in reverse.
You have to carry it. Yeah, we have to go slow. Hold on.
Hold on something. Hold on to the road.
Папа хочет сфотаться, подожди.
10 of them were in this area where you currently see right now. There were 5 doors that had bedrooms inside of them, and the 6th door over here leads into the galley or the kitchen aboard this ship. Now, we'll talk about the back end room in a little bit, but you can poke your head over here and see what it looked like for the sailors themselves. Does it look very comfortable, folks?
No.
So that would have enough space for 2 people. Keep in mind, humans are constantly getting longer and longer over the years. The average sailor aboard the Ambrose was anywhere from 5'2" to 5'5". So I would not be able to very comfortably sleep on these. I'm 6'1", folks. So if we have everybody inside of our space here, I want to point out just a couple of things. We'll talk a little bit about the life of the crew and how they would pass time. But, again, this is the part of the ship where 10 of our 14 crew members would be. Where are the other 4? The other 4 are the higher-ranking captains, and they would be at the back end of the ship. But first base, can you point us to where the crew's quarters are? Where are the people sleeping? All right, feel free to hold that high for everyone. We are currently in the crew's quarters. You got it, folks. Very, very good. So, we'll see rooms to our left right over here that are double bunked. There are 5 of them in total along this wall. That 6th room, as I mentioned, is the galley. one of our 10 people on this side of the ship was the galley man. He made meals in this here kitchen. I mentioned that this ship had both electricity and running water as of 1908. That running water would be at the back end in the hand pump where you can get your fresh water. And when this ship was rocking back and forth on the waters of the Ambrose Channel, how would you stay balanced? There's a hanging bar at the top of the galley where you can hang on to so you're not spilling your meals on yourself, right? Now, let's talk a little bit about the crew itself. This is one of the facts that I think is fascinating. How would you pass your time when you're waiting for these big, big ships to come in? It could be hours at a time before the next ship comes in. So what would you do to help entertain yourselves? You might write to your family and loved ones. What was really attractive about being a sailor on this ship was that you didn't need any previous experience on a boat. This ship was incredibly immigrant friendly. Our good friend, Mr. John Wolfe Ambrose, was of course an Irish immigrant who came to America with only $6 to his name. And this ship was incredibly immigrant friendly to all of those Europeans coming into America during the 1900s. So this ship was very, very pro-immigrant. A ship crew entirely comprised of nearly all European immigrants coming from all over into America and settling in. Now, how would you pass the time? This picture over here is one of my favorite facts. This ship was one of the first ships to have a radio shack on board, which we'll be able to see at the end of our tour, which means we were able to communicate with other ships. And how might you pass the time? You notice over here, these folks are playing cards. One of my favorite bits of trivia on board this ship is that this ship is the home place of a very particular game. There was a French immigrant who came onto the crew of this ship in the early 1900s, and he brought with him the knowledge of a certain game from France called poker, P-O-Q-U-E, which he adapted to the 52 card set here in America, and it was nicknamed poker, as you folks know it today. Since this was a ship that had a radio shack, if there were other ships sitting in the water around us and they were bored, you'd hear us on the radio. Roger, Roger, this here is Ambrose. Do you folks copy? Do you have a deck of cards? We'd like to teach you a game today. And so, the spread of poker began right here on this ship. We'll be able to check out more areas of this vessel in the back over here. It might be a little bit crowded given our space, but in the back we have the windlass, as well as a bathroom and a shower, which we can quickly pop our heads into. There were no sailors aboard that needed to shower during that time. There's a little bit of construction this morning, so we apologize for the ladder. But past the ladder, there is going to be a bathroom for you to be able to use the bathroom, which is not a very common thing for light vessels in the early 1900s. Yeah, Miles, that's a great question. What is this? This is something called the windlass. This is a big machine that helps lift up the anchors. Is everyone okay down there? So, this windlass, when we turn on our steam engine, there are two sets of anchor chains that we see right here. This anchor chain leads upstairs to the anchor that we saw, the mushroom anchor that was at the top of the ship. And this set of anchor chains leads to the front of the ship here. So, let me lower this down. My apologies, folks. This wheel here, this is called the Wildcat. When we turn on the steam-powered engine, this is going to lower using the steam power, which is very strong. It's going to start wrapping those anchor coils downstairs into the anchor locker, and that is how it lifts the anchor up. And if it wants to lower the anchor down, you simply turn the Wildcat in the opposite direction with the gear, and it'll start lowering that anchor into the water. So, this device uses steam power to lift those anchors up and down. We're going to be heading back through the hallway this way. We're going to be going on the right-hand side into the resupply hallway. So folks, we're going to head through the resupply hallway. Please watch your hand and take a step over. Alright, folks, gathering around over here. I mentioned that this ship has what does it say? Fire, yeah. So why do we think we use these buckets?
To shoot out fire.
And to put out the fire. Yes, very good, Miles. Now, how we would do things. Figure 16 over here, this is the resupply hatch. This is how we would get supplies every 2 weeks. There would be a supply boat that would come up to the side of the Ambrose over here. We'd open this up. They'd put a wooden triangle ramp right onto our ship, and they would roll barrels of the things that we needed right on here. Also behind us, in the galley where we made food, there was that water pump. You could also use that water pump to clean our clothes, and you could take an iron rod and run it across all the way to the other end, and that would be where they would be hanging their laundry. So you'd be using your fresh water to keep your clothes clean. Again, this ship was very advanced for the early 1900s. It had a lot of luxuries in mind for the crew. We're going to be heading into the engine room in just a little bit, but this ship was very attractive to both newlyweds and to folks that were approaching the age of retirement, because this ship had a schedule of 3 weeks on, 1 week off. That means at the end of every month, you have 7 days to go back home using the skid boats right outside these doors. You'd be able to head back to where you lived, and you were able to see your families, your loved ones. If you were a newlywed, you could see your wife and your kids. So this ship was very, very inclusive and very, very luxurious. Now, this ship had a steam engine that ran on coal. When we had barrels of coal coming for us every 2 weeks, right where our good friend Miles is standing, we opened that bad boy up and we would lower 500 pounds of coal from a barrel downstairs into our coal bunkers. These are also water nozzles over here, where there would be a fresh water tanker, and they would take a big square nozzle and stick it into the square peg right over here, and that would fill us up with water in tanks down below. That water would go into our galley where we can do our laundry as we are seeing. Now, we're going to be heading into the engine room, folks. I'm not authorized to pick things up if you drop them in the engine room, so be very careful. Hold on to them. We're going to be heading inside the engine room to talk a little bit about the engines. Again. So, I'm going to ask you to remain right there.
You want me to carry you?
You folks can gather around. I recommend right about here, the furthest you should go for your own safety. This is probably fine. I'm going to stand over here. All right, everybody come on in. You'll see downstairs is not the steam-powered engine that I mentioned that we had in 1907. This ship was originally belonging to the United States Lighthouse Enterprise in 1907, but in 1933, this ship belonged to the Coast Guard. And when the Coast Guard took over this ship, they replaced the steam-powered engine with the engine that we see down below. This is a diesel engine. For those that are interested, this is a 300 horsepower, 6-cylinder diesel engine from General Motors, for what that's worth. What that means is, if that doesn't make any sense to you, that means that this engine has the force of 300 horses pulling on an object at the same time. That's what that means. Now, what are the differences between the two engines that we had on board? We'll talk about pros and cons real quick. So, with the steam-powered engine, I mentioned it would have to be on 24/7, right? That means 4 people are downstairs constantly shoveling coal into the steam engine. But with this diesel engine, you can turn it on and off at any point. With the steam-powered engine, it would be the loud ringing sound. As a matter of fact, folks, I want us to do a quick little hands-on activity. Can you folks make some noises for me? I want to see if we can, if this area here was very known for being very, very loud. The steam-powered engine would constantly be whirring 24 hours a day, and people were known to get something called tinnitus, which is when your ears are ringing, even when you're off the ship. So, how would you be able to hear what's happening upstairs if you had all this loud noise over here? I mentioned those hammers upstairs made different sounds on this bell. I want to see if you folks can make some loud noises for me and tell me if you hear this sound, okay? So if I say 3, 2, 1, and you guys can make some noise after 3, 2, 1, does that sound all right?
Yes.
All right, sailors, let's see if we can make some loud noises. 3, 2, 1, let me hear some loud noises.
Whoa!
That cuts right through any sound that might be coming from that steam-powered engine downstairs. So even if it's whirring real loud, you'll be able to still hear that gong. Very good, folks. Give yourselves a round of applause. Nicely done. Sailors. We're going to be heading into one of our last destinations, which is going to be the ward's room right around the corner. So we're going to be headed through that right-hand door. Very, very good, everybody. Thank you so much. Good. And you can head into the last room at the end of this hallway here, the ward's room, where the captains, or the wards, as they may call them, would be. All right, folks, you can pile into the ward's room. We do ask, however, please do not sit in the chairs. You'll notice that there were 4 wards, which means 4 chairs. There are now 3. I'll let you folks do the math. That means please be gentle with the seats. Please try not to sit in them if you can. You can gather around the space. I'll let you folks head on in. I'll be the last one in. Our radio shack will be right up these stairs. Now, folks, you are currently... So down there will be that picture where the wards currently are. And you can see them posed absolutely naturally and totally not staged to look as though they were intellectuals reading their high English literature, such as Shakespeare. In this area were the higher ranking captains of this ship, and you folks did something that every regular sailor would not be able to do. You simply walked right in to the wardroom. Now, this here is called the threshold. Not everybody could just walk into this room. If you wanted to be inside the wardroom, you'd have to salute your wards, and they would have to grant you permission in order to cross inside. So, there was an order to who was allowed in this space. This was a private space meant for the quote-unquote important or higher-ranking members of this ship. There would be 4 rooms for each of the wards, and we can see one of them right over here, which has a lot of space just for one person. Compare that to the space that we saw for the crew. You're sharing your space with other sailors, but the captains would have their own mattress space. They would also have cabinet space down below, as well as closet space, right? So, this area would be quite luxurious for the wards, except one regular sailor would be able to walk in and out whenever they wanted to, because they had certain duties in this room. Right behind us over here, folks, that is the ward's galley, which is a special kitchen for making meals for the captains. So the person who was making meals at the front of the ship, our galley man, he was allowed to walk into this room whenever he wanted to. So he was a little bit special. I wonder how that made the others feel. So, how did this ship change over time, folks? This ship sailed from the years 1907 up until 1962, and why did it stop hailing ships in during that time? Well, that's because technology played a role. I mentioned those 3 things that the ship had to do. Do we remember what they were, folks? We had to stay put in the water, right? We had to be seen by other ships, and then we had to
be heard.
Be heard. Very good, Millicent. Over time, technology would make it so that you didn't need 14 people to man this ship. We'll talk about how this changed over time, but this room changed over time because of technology as well. Can anyone think of a big device that you might put right over here in the 1930s and the 1940s that the wards might gather around and watch together? I wonder what they could be watching together. It would be a big box. It's more a flat screen nowadays. You folks know
television?
It as television, yes. So a big, big box would be right here, and it would have antennas, and they would get a couple of channels. So our wards would be able to watch some TV together, and they were big, big fans of the Yankees, folks. So, when they were blaring that Yankees game at full volume, and all of the other sailors heard the Yankees were playing, and it was an exciting game, do you think they cared about saluting their captains to come inside?
No.
Everyone would bum rush this room to gather around and see how the Yanks were doing. So, over time, the wardroom would become less and less strict about who was in here, and it would become a rec room or a place for everyone to spend their time together. Towards the end of the time of this ship, in the 1950s, we no longer even needed 4 captains or 4 wards to help. We only had 2. So this became a common space for everyone. Now we're going to be exiting the wards room. I grant you all permission to head on out. We're going to be able to see the radio shack on the right-hand side of the stairs. Feel free to take a look inside. Photo and video are perfectly okay. But once you're done checking out the radio shack, please join me at the back section of the ship.
would be fun if we would walk up the street.
Now, after the use, this was what replaced this ship in the 1960s, and it would change again in the year 2003, when a piece of technology updated what the Ambrose would look like. One piece of technology that's represented by 3 letters, you might have heard of it, G, P, S. With the Global Positioning Satellite or System, you would have this one singular buoy would do the job of 14 people. It would do those 3 things: stay put, be seen, and be heard. But is that the lasting legacy of this ship? Is this what this ship is remembered for? Not quite. This ship is remembered for being the ship that brought in millions of immigrants here into New York Harbor, making New York City the city we know and love. With those millions of people, that comes technology, that comes culture, that becomes languages. All of the things that when we look around and we see all of the things that make New York City what it is today, a lot of that came through the waters of the New York Harbor thanks to the Ambrose. So folks, we have one wonderful gentleman that we can thank for making our city the way it is today. I think you know who I'm talking about. Our friend with those wonderful mutton chops, Mr. John Wolfe Ambrose himself. This man right over here helped define the city that we know and love today. That's going to be the end of our tour on the lightship Ambrose. I want to thank you all. Give yourselves a round of applause for joining us here on our tour. Thank you, Miles and Millicent. You did a great job, everybody. We're going to be heading off in just a moment's time. Please make sure you have all of your belongings. If you have any last-minute questions, feel free to ask me. We're going to be heading down the gangway again. I want to thank you all so much for coming.
Thanks so much.
Of course. Thank you, folks.
Give me your hands when you're going.
Of course. Not a problem. I hope you have a wonderful remaining day. I'm going to open this door. After the first people down, feel free to undo the rope. I'm going to close everything behind you. I'm just going to hold this open for you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, folks. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you for joining us here on the Ambrose.